Relations between Canada and China have reached an entirely new level, and what just yesterday seemed like cautious rapprochement now looks like a full-scale strategic shift. Once one of Washington's closest allies, Canada is increasingly drifting toward Beijing, and the recent meeting between the two countries' leaders has become an alarming signal for the United States. Just days ago, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC 2025 summit in Gyeongju, South Korea, the first official meeting between the two leaders since 2017. This meeting was more than a diplomatic formality. It symbolized a transition in which Canada seems to be telling Washington, "We are no longer willing to remain in the shadows." According to Reuters, Carney and Xi agreed to promote a strategic partnership covering trade, energy, technology, finance, and the green economy. China called Canada an important partner in shaping a sustainable future, while Carney emphasized that Canada is ready to work with those who offer real opportunities, not just slogans. Such wording is not mere rhetoric, but a clear statement of intent to reshape the architecture of foreign economic relations. In his address at APEC, Carney declared that the era of globalization as we knew it is over. The era of free trade and unlimited investment has ended, he said, and now we are entering a world where trust and strategic partnership play the decisive role. These words served as a kind of manifesto for a new course. Canada is no longer an unquestioned link in the American chain and is seeking its own place between Washington and Beijing. The reasons for this shift are clear. After Donald Trump's return to the White House, the United States began pursuing a more aggressive protectionist policy. New import tariffs, including on Canadian goods, and a 10% increase in duties sent a clear message that Washington is no longer willing to make concessions, even to its closest partners. Ironically, it was an advertisement, a simple commercial in which Canada presented itself as an independent manufacturing hub of North America, that triggered the trade measures. For Ottawa, it was the last straw. "We cannot build our future based on unpredictability," Carney said on the sidelines of his meeting with Xi. Unlike the United States, China acts methodically, consistently, and with cold calculation. Beijing has long been building its economic influence not through threats but through offers, concrete, beneficial, and designed for decades ahead. And Canada has become one of the countries Beijing chose to showcase its new model of engagement with the West. According to Financial Times insiders, the Chinese side proposed several cooperation packages for Canada: investments in green energy, participation in building infrastructure for electric vehicles, access to Chinese battery technologies, and processing of critical minerals. Beijing is ready to offer Canada what the United States no longer provides: long-term stability, predictability, and respect for sovereignty. For Washington, this meeting was an alarming signal. If Canada, one of America's most stable allies, begins to deepen relations with China, it undermines the very foundation of the U.S. containment strategy toward Beijing. This is especially true, given that in recent months, Trump has paid little attention to North America, focusing instead on domestic political campaigns and efforts to reinforce a protectionist economy. The White House simply slept through the moment when Canada began to drift away, a former Trump foreign policy advisor told Politico. Beijing, on the other hand, calculated everything in advance. It makes no loud declarations but strengthens its position step by step, through culture, university exchanges, investments, and most importantly, economic integration. According to analysts at the South China Morning Post, China views Canada as a Western node of a new trade network, through which it can establish links with Europe and the United States, while bypassing political barriers. It is symbolic that during their meeting, Xi and Carney discussed not only trade, but also issues of security and climate. For China, it is important to show the world that it can act as a responsible global leader, while for Canada, it is a chance to demonstrate that it can conduct foreign policy without waiting for Washington's approval. In its official statement, the Chinese side emphasized that it is ready to work with Canada in a pragmatic and constructive manner to put bilateral relations back on a stable path of development. According to AP, the two sides discussed resuming Canadian canola exports, seafood trade, and participation of Canadian companies in Chinese green industrialization projects. Canada also expressed its willingness to consider joining the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which was previously seen as an instrument of Chinese influence. For China, this is both a symbolic and strategic success. Canada, a G7 member and an Anglo-Saxon democracy, is taking a step toward Beijing. This is a serious blow to the myth that the West stands united against China. For the United States, however, it is a painful signal. If even its closest neighbors are seeking alternatives, it means the American model is losing its appeal. Reuters noted that while Washington is publicly refraining from comment, concern is growing within the administration. Several White House sources said the National Security Council is preparing an analysis of the implications of the Canada-China rapprochement for U.S. interests. Meanwhile, the Pentagon believes that China is deliberately undermining American alliances, not through military means, but through economic expansion. China's strategy of soft pulling is working. The country does not demand political declarations but simply offers what its partners want: investment, access to technology, and markets. That is why Canada, tired of American protectionism, could become a model for others. Bloomberg analysts call this the domino effect. If Canada manages to strike a balance between Washington and Beijing, countries like Australia, South Korea, and even Japan may follow its example. In this context, the recent meeting was not just a diplomatic act, but the beginning of a new course. For Trump, all this looks like a blow to his pride. He built his policy on the principle of America first, but the result is that allies increasingly say, America is not the only one. In the eyes of the global public, the United States is losing its role as the unquestioned leader. China is in no hurry. It acts like a player confident in time, wrote The Guardian. While Washington tries to exert pressure through tariffs, Beijing is step-by-step building a network of interdependence, offering countries what they truly want: economic development. The Canadian economy today needs investments and markets, and China seems ready to provide both. Yet this rapprochement is not without risks. In Canadian society, concerns about China's interference in the country's internal affairs remain strong. For China, this success is not just a diplomatic victory, but a strategic signal to all Western countries. Beijing is ready to cooperate with anyone willing to look beyond Washington. In the long term, this could reshape the very structure of global trade. If Canada continues to deepen its cooperation with China, North America will cease to be an exclusively American sphere of influence. For the United States, this is a challenge. For China, an opportunity. And for the world, a sign that the era of unipolarity is truly coming to an end. The sooner Trump and his administration realize this, the smaller the consequences will be for the United States. Because today, it is Washington itself, through its decisions and tariffs, that is pushing its allies to seek alternatives. And Canada is only the first in that line.